In every corner of the world, across every century and civilization, human beings have laid their heads down at night. From the humblest straw mat to the silken cushions of kings, from the dry warmth of desert evenings to the damp chill of river valleys, the act of closing one's eyes and surrendering to sleep has united us all. Long before the first cities rose, our ancestors understood that rest was not a luxury, it was survival. The body, after its long hours of hunting, gathering, or working the land, needed time to repair itself. Muscles quietly mended, the heart slowed its pace. The mind retreated into a strange and private theater of dreams. No matter where you were, born whether in the icy steppes of the north or the sun-baked plains of Africa, you could not escape this nightly need. The details have always varied. In some places, sleep came in long, unbroken stretches. In others, it arrived in 2 or 3 shorter phases, scattered through the dark hours. In certain cultures, the night began with storytelling around a fire. In others, silence fell quickly, broken only by the rustle of wind through reeds or the shifting of animals nearby. Yet the core experience was the same, an embrace of stillness, a release from the demands of the waking day. Even the language of sleep crosses barriers. We have always recognized the deep sigh of someone drifting off, the slow breathing of slumber, the quiet murmur of a dreamer. In the past, as today, those sounds brought comfort. They told us we were not alone in the night. In this chapter, we begin a journey to explore not just how people rested, dreamed, and even snored, but why these acts have always been more than biological necessity. Sleep is the soft thread that ties humanity together, from the dawn of time to this very moment. Before the comfort of pillows and the luxury of linen sheets, human sleep was shaped by the raw elements of the earth itself. Our earliest resting places were not rooms, but landscapes, caves tucked into limestone cliffs, hollows beneath overhanging rock, or the soft leaf litter beneath the branches of ancient trees. Archaeologists believe that some of the very first beds were simple arrangements of grass or reeds, piled thick to create a layer between a sleeping body and the cold, hard ground. These makeshift mattresses provided warmth and a barrier against insects and moisture. In South Africa, a 200-year-old site revealed layers of sedgegrass and aromatic plants, perhaps the first blend of comfort and pest control, placed there intentionally by early humans who already understood that a good night's rest was worth preparing for. As people began to master fire, sleep changed dramatically. Flames offered more than light. They kept predators at bay and allowed warmth to be shared deep into the night. Groups could gather around embers, drowsing to the gentle crackle of wood. The scent of smoke, mingling with the cool air, must have been as familiar to them as the feel of a blanket is to us now, in open plains. Nomadic bands likely rested in simple shelters of hides stretched over wooden frames. In wetter climates, platforms were built from branches to keep sleepers off damp ground. Wherever they lived, early humans adapted their resting spots to the demands of the seasons, sometimes curled into hollows of snow for warmth, sometimes lying in the open under the endless, starlit sky. These early sleeping places were not just functional. They were the very first bedrooms humanity ever knew, sanctuaries where the day's struggles ended, and the timeless rhythm of sleep began its nightly work. As human life moved from open plains and forest shelters into the permanence of villages and cities, the way we slept shifted with it. Our resting places became not just a patch of ground, but a reflection of our homes, our communities, and the world beyond our walls. In the earliest settlements, people still slept close to the earth. Clay floors, lined with straw or woven mats, formed the base of the sleeping space. Entire families often lay together, sometimes alongside their animals, sharing warmth during the cold months. Night was rarely silent. The soft shuffle of livestock, the rustle of bedding, and the breathing of loved ones created a kind of living lullaby. As architecture grew more complex, so too did the spaces in which people rested. Mud brick homes offered protection from the wind and rain, while elevated sleeping platforms kept sleepers safe from pests. In hotter climates, open courtyards allowed cool night air to drift across resting bodies. In colder regions, thick walls and central hearths meant that sleeping areas could be warmed before nightfall. The rise of cities brought another change. Night was no longer completely dark or entirely quiet. Torches burned in the streets, and the footsteps of night watchmen echoed between stone walls. Distant voices, the creak of wooden carts, and the calls of late working traders became part of the urban nightscape. Sleep became something negotiated not only with nature, but with the growing hum of human activity, from wild landscapes to enclosed rooms. From the unpredictable sounds of the wilderness to the steady murmurs of a bustling town, our habitats have always shaped our rest. The places where we lay down each night mirror the world we live in, telling the story of how humanity slowly built its way from the open sky to the privacy of the bedroom. Before the low, constant buzz of machines became the soundtrack of human life, nights were filled with an entirely different kind of music, one shaped by the earth, the seasons, and the living world. The dark hours did not bring silence. Instead, they carried their own chorus, gentle or haunting depending on where you rested. In the countryside, night began with the soft fading of daytime sounds, the calls of birds giving way to the steady hum of insects. In warm climates, crickets and cicadas sang in steady, rhythmic waves. In cooler lands, the wind might be the dominant voice, threading through trees, rattling shutters, or sighing against the sides of tents and huts. Occasionally, an animal's distant cry would pierce the darkness, a wolf on the hunt, a fox yipping in the far hills, an owl calling from the shadows. For those sleeping near rivers or coasts, water was the night's constant companion. The gentle lap of waves, the rush of a current, or the deep rumble of the sea in a storm could lull or unsettle, depending on the mood of the weather. In mountain villages, the nights were quieter still, broken only by the crackle of a hearth fire or the creak of wooden beams settling as the air cooled. Even in ancient cities, before the factories drone and the traffic's roar, night carried its own texture of sound. Street vendors closing their stalls, watchmen exchanging murmured greetings, the clop of hooves on stone streets, or the faint echo of a song drifting from a late tavern, these were the heartbeat of urban evenings. To the ancient sleeper, these sounds were not noise, but life itself, familiar and reassuring. They reminded the listener that the world continued to breathe around them, keeping quiet vigil while they surrendered to sleep. Long before dreams were studied by scientists, they were understood as messages from beyond, a bridge between the waking world and the mysterious realms that lay hidden from human sight. For ancient peoples, the visions that arrived in sleep were rarely dismissed as random. They were omens, warnings, prophecies, or blessings, delivered by God's spirits or ancestors. In Mesopotamia, dreams were carefully recorded on clay tablets, their meanings studied like sacred texts. A vision of water might mean abundance. A dream of falling, a sign of danger ahead. Special dream interpreters served in royal courts, their role as vital as any scribe or priest. In ancient Egypt, dreams were thought to be conversations with the divine. The Egyptian dream book, dating back over 3,000 years, listed hundreds of possible dream images, alongside their meanings, some hopeful, others deeply unsettling. Pharaohs and commoners alike might pray for a good dream before bed, offering incense or reciting protective words to keep nightmares away. The Greeks believed that the god Morpheus shaped dreams, sending them to mortals as both guidance and illusion. In temples of Asclepius, the god of healing, the sick would sleep in sacred chambers, hoping for a dream that revealed their cure. These nights were not mere rest, they were spiritual appointments, moments when the human soul might receive divine instruction. In every culture, dreams were a kind of night travel, voyages beyond the body, journeys that could change the course of a life. Whether seen as whispers from the gods, coded messages from the spirit world, or glimpses of the future, they gave sleep a deeper purpose. To dream was not just to rest, it was to step, however briefly, into another world. Far from the bustling streets of Thebes and Memphis, the nights in rural Egypt unfolded slowly, under skies so clear they seemed endless. Here, in farming villages, and along the quiet banks of the Nile, many people slept, not behind solid walls, but beneath the open heavens. The climate made it possible. Warm, dry nights meant that a roof was not always necessary, and the air carried a softness after the heat of the day. In small mud brick homes, flat rooftops often served as sleeping places. Families would climb up in the evening, bringing with them woven mats, simple blankets, and perhaps a jar of cool water. The roof offered more than fresh air, it was an escape from the insects and heat trapped inside. From these high perches, the view was timeless. The stars shimmered across the black sky, and the moon traced its slow arc above the fields. In the distance, one might hear the gentle rush of the Nile or the quiet bray of a donkey. A faint breeze carried the scent of river reeds and baked earth, mingling with the warmth of sun-dried bricks beneath the sleeper's body. For the ancient Egyptian farmer, this open-air rest was both practical and deeply connected to the rhythm of life. The same sun god, Ra, who blazed through the day's labor, now watched over the night's dreams, his light replaced by the softer glow of moon and stars. Sleep was taken under his eternal gaze, wrapped in the security of a land that had sustained life for millennia. Here, the boundary between the human home and the natural world was thin. To rest was not to shut out the night, but to welcome it to lie beneath the endless ceiling of the sky and let the universe itself become your bedroom. While farmers in rural Egypt drifted to sleep beneath the stars, the pharaohs and their royal households rested in chambers designed to impress even in the stillness of night. In these sacred and opulent spaces, the bed was not just a place to sleep, it was a symbol of power, status, and divine favor. Egyptian beds were crafted with an attention to beauty as much as comfort. Skilled artisans shaped sturdy wooden frames from imported timbers like cedar and ebony, rare materials that traveled hundreds of miles along ancient trade routes. Some frames curved gently upward, imitating the natural bend of a reclining body. The legs might be carved into the form of animal limbs, lion's paws for strength, or bull's hooves for endurance, turning the bed itself into a work of art, instead of a mattress as we know it today. The pharaoh's bed often held a woven surface of reeds or leather strips, stretched taut for support. Upon this base lay layers of fine linen, spun from the flax that grew in abundance along the Nile. The whitest and softest of these linens were reserved for the elite, their smoothness and cool touch perfect for the Egyptian climate. Pillows, too, were not the plush cushions we imagine, but curved headrests carved from wood, ivory, or stone, designed to support the neck and keep elaborate hairstyles intact. For the pharaoh, this position was not merely practical, it was believed to align the body properly with spiritual energies, maintaining harmony between the physical and the divine. In the glow of oil lamps and perfumed incense, these royal beds were more than furniture. They were thrones of the night, where the ruler of Egypt could dream beneath protective charms, certain that even in slumber they rested as both sovereign and symbol of the gods. In ancient Egypt, dreams were never taken lightly, whether experienced by a farmer sleeping on a rooftop or a pharaoh reclining on a bed of cedar and linen. A vision in the night was believed to be a message on echo from the gods, the spirits of the dead, or the unseen forces that shaped the world. The Egyptians recorded these nighttime visions in what we now call dream books, carefully written scrolls that matched specific dream images to their meanings. One such text, dating to around 1000 BCE, contains hundreds of examples. If a person dreamed of drinking warm beer, it might mean misfortune was coming. If they dreamed of eating crocodile meat, it could mean they would be protected by a powerful ally. Each entry began with a simple phrase, "If a man sees himself in a dream," followed by the omen good or bad that such a vision foretold. These interpretations were not the realm of common folk alone. Priests and professional dream interpreters, reciters of dreams, served in temples and royal courts. They were trained to decode the symbols that emerged in sleep, often linking them to the movements of the stars or the will of specific gods. A favorable dream before a journey might be taken as divine approval to proceed. A troubling dream could lead to a change of plans or the performance of protective rituals. For the Egyptians, dreams blurred the line between mortal life and the eternal. To close one's eyes was to open a door into another realm, a place where the living could meet the divine, receive counsel, or glimpse the shape of the future. In this way, sleep was not merely rest, it was a nightly audience with forces far greater than oneself. For Egypt's priests and nobles, the hours before sleep were not a time to elapse into bed, but a deliberate passage from the waking world to the sacred realm of dreams. Rest was both a physical necessity and a spiritual act, and the body had to be readied just as carefully as the mind. The process often began with purification. Priests in service to the gods would bathe in cool water drawn from the Nile or in basins within temple courtyards, cleansing not only dust and sweat but symbolic impurity gathered during the day. Nobles, too, might bathe before beds in scented water infused with lotus, myrrh, or cinnamon, filling their chambers with the soft perfume of the night. Clothing for rest was light and fresh lighten garments, loose and unadorned, chosen as much for spiritual cleanliness as for comfort. in the warm Egyptian climate. Jewelry was set aside, save for amulets intended to protect the sleeper from evil spirits. A scarab bead, an Eye of Horus pendant, or a small charm invoking the goddess Hathor might remain at the bedside or be worn through the night, before lying down. Prayers or quiet recitations were offered. A priest might call upon Thoth, the god of wisdom, to grant clear visions. A noble might ask for Ra's protection until the morning light. Some would light small oil lamps or burn incense, the smoke curling gently through the chamber like a final offering to the unseen dot. In these moments, sleep became more than rest, it was preparation for a journey. The mind was calmed, the body purified, and the soul made ready to travel into the mysterious realm of dreams, where messages from the divine might wait just beyond the veil of night. While Egypt's nobles drifted to sleep on carved wooden beds wrapped in fine linen, most of the population knew a far simpler kind of rest. For the commoner, sleep was woven into the rhythm of family life, work, and the close companionship of both people and animals in small mud brick homes. Floors were often lined with woven reed mats, sometimes layered with straw for extra softness. These mats could be rolled away during the day, leaving space for cooking, weaving, or gathering. At night, they became the household's shared sleeping area, uniting parents, children, and on colder nights livestock in the same space. Chickens might roost in a corner, a goat could be tethered near the door, and a cat, treasured for keeping mice at bay, might curl at the foot of a mat. Privacy was rare. The closeness of the sleeping arrangement meant that the sounds of the night were shared, the deep breathing of a spouse, the soft murmurs of a dreaming child, the occasional snort or shuffle of an animal. These familiar noises, far from being a disturbance, offered comfort, a reminder that the household was safe and together. In the warmer months, families often took their mats to rooftops or courtyards, sleeping under the open sky. In winter, the hearth's embers glowed in the center of the room, and sleepers clustered nearby for warmth. Comfort came not from luxury but from routine, the steady knowledge that, after the day's labor, there would be a place to lie down among loved ones. For the commoner, sleep was not a solitary act. It was a nightly reaffirmation of the bonds between family, neighbors, and the living creatures that shared their homes. In the gentle press of that closeness, rest came easily. In the land between the Tigris and Euphrates, where fields shimmered with grain and canals stitched the earth into a fertile patchwork, the people of Sumer shaped their nights around the rhythm of the rivers and the turning of the seasons. Sleep, like farming, followed a pattern as steady as the sunrise. The Sumerian day began early, often before the first light touched the flat horizon. By the time the sun sank into the dusty haze of evening, laborers had already spent long hours tending fields, hauling water, or crafting goods in workshops. When darkness came, it brought with it the promise of rest, but also a kind of gentle watchfulness. Life along the river was rich and productive, but also vulnerable to floods, storms, and unwelcome visitors. In most households, sleep was not a single unbroken stretch. Historians believe that, in many ancient cultures, including Sumer people, may have followed a segmented sleep cycle, an early first sleep from shortly after dusk until midnight, followed by a period of wakefulness, and then a second sleep until dawn. During that quiet hour between sleep phases, some prayed, told stories, tended the hearth, or even walked to a neighbor's house under the pale wash of moonlight. Houses were built of mud brick, their thick walls holding, in the day's warmth well into the evening. Reed mats or woolen blankets provided the sleeping surface, and in wealthier homes, low wooden frames lifted sleepers off the ground. In the hot months, the flat roof served as a cooler, breezier bedroom. From up there, one could see the slow glint of the rivers in the moonlight, and hear the distant calls of night watchmen patrolling the city walls. For the Sumerians, sleep was more than a pause between dice. It was a carefully timed part of life's great cycle, woven into the fabric of work, worship, and the quiet hours when the stars ruled the sky. In the warm, arid lands of ancient Mesopotamia, the bed was less about luxury and more about adapting to the heat. Comfort came not from softness, but from clever design structures that kept sleepers cool, lifted them from the dusty ground, and worked in harmony with the climate of the Fertile Crescent. For the poorest households, the simplest bed was the earth itself, covered with a reed mat or woven rushes. These mats, light and breathable, could be rolled away by day and carried outdoors at night when the air was cooler. In wealthier homes, low sleeping platforms were built directly into the room, often from the same clay that formed the walls. These clay platforms absorbed the day's heat and then slowly released it, keeping the sleeper warm on cooler nights but never trapping too much heat during the summer. Wooden bed frames, though rarer due to the scarcity of quality timber, were prized for their durability and slight flexibility. They often supported a mesh of leather strips or plant fiber ropes, which created a firm but airy base for sleeping. This design allowed air to circulate beneath the body, a quiet relief in the sweltering season. In the hottest months, the ultimate relief was to sleep on the flat rooftop. Some families built simple raised beds from wood or reeds for these open-air nights, shielding themselves with light cloth canopies to keep out insects and soften the glare of the moon. From these rooftops, a sleeper could drift off to the sound of the wind moving over the canals and the distant murmur of the riverbanks. In a place where the sun's heat defined daily life, the Mesopotamian bed was a tool of adaptation, efficient and shaped by 1,000 nights beneath a vast, unbroken sky. In ancient Mesopotamia, the sleeping mind was never considered idle. Dreams were thought to be dispatches from the gods, and the Sumerians, Akkadians, and Babylonians took them seriously enough to press their meanings into clay for generations to read. These dream tablets are among the oldest surviving records of humanity's attempts to understand the visions of the night. Written in the neat wedges of cuneiform script, these texts cataloged hundreds of dream scenarios alongside their interpretations. The structure was often simple. If a man dreams, followed by the image, and then the omen it foretold, a dream of standing in clear water might be taken as a promise of good fortune. A dream of losing one's teeth could warn of a family death. Even the smallest detail, the direction one was facing, the color of an object, was thought to alter the meaning. Dream interpretation was a skilled profession. The Baru, or diviner, might consult not only the dream itself but also celestial movements, recent omens, or the dreamer's social role before rendering a verdict. These specialists served both ordinary citizens and kings, for a dream in the royal household could influence political decisions, military campaigns, or religious rituals. Some dreams were believed to be direct communications from deities like Ishtar, or Marduk, while others were seen as warnings sent by restless spirits. To ignore a troubling vision was to risk misfortune. To receive a favorable one was to walk into the next day under divine protection. For the people of the Fertile Crescent, dreams were woven into the practical fabric of life. The same hands that built canals and shaped bricks also shaped the clay, to record the whispers of the gods, proof that the night's visions could guide the daylight's deeds. In the city-states of Mesopotamia, where rulers balanced the demands of gods, laws, and people, sleep was not simply a pause in duty, it was often part of the duty itself. Leaders were expected to approach major decisions with a clear mind, and the quiet hours of night were seen as a time when wisdom could be renewed or even directly granted by divine forces. Kings, governors, and temple officials frequently sought rest before issuing decrees, settling disputes, or planning military campaigns. This was more than common sense, was a practice rooted in the belief that the gods might speak through dreams. A ruler who drifted to sleep after prayer could awaken with a sense of certainty, claiming the decision was guided by a vision or omen. Some royal inscriptions describe moments when a god appeared in a dream to instruct a leader. The Babylonian king Nabonidus claimed that the moon god Sin commanded him to restore a temple. Gudea of Lagash recounted that a dream gave him exact measurements for building a great sanctuary. These visions were not merely personal, they became part of official history. Proof that leadership was in harmony with divine will, even without a prophetic dream. The act of resting before judgment carried symbolic weight. It showed that a leader was deliberate, patient, and respectful of the sacred connection between night and clarity. Just as a plowed field needed time before planting, a mind needed time before deciding. In this way, the bed of a Mesopotamian ruler was as important to governance as the throne. The laws that shaped cities and the orders that sent armies to war were sometimes born not in the council chamber, but in the stillness of night, between the moment the eyelids closed and the dawn broke over the walls of the city. In the walled cities of ancient Mesopotamia, not everyone surrendered fully to the night. While most citizens lay on red mats or rooftop beds, others kept their eyes open, pacing the dark streets and watching the gates. These night watchmen carried the weight of the city's safety on their shoulders, their rest stolen in small fragments, if it came at all. The great gates' massive wooden doors, reinforced with bronze, were the city's most vulnerable points. During the day, they welcomed merchants, travelers, and envoys. At night, they were sealed, barred with heavy beams, and entrusted to guards who stood watch in the flicker of oil lamps. These sentinels listened for more than footsteps. They watched for distant fires, the movement of shadows, or the glint of moonlight on a weapon. Inside the walls, patrols moved slowly along narrow streets. Their duties were as much about order as defense, quieting drunken disputes, deterring thieves, or ensuring that no stray embers from a hearth caught and spread through tightly packed homes. In hot seasons, when many citizens slept on rooftops, the watchmen's voices might drift upward, blending with the night air, a reminder that someone was awake and alert. For these guardians, sleep came in irregular snatches, often during the day in shaded rooms, or at dawn when their shift ended. It was a restless kind of rest, shaped by the demands of vigilance. Yet their sacrifice allowed others to sleep deeply. secure in the knowledge that while the city dreamed, someone stood between them and the dangers of the dark dot. In this way, the night in Mesopotamia was never truly still. Behind the safety of barred gates, rest and wakefulness coexisted, woven together in the fabric of civic life, each dependent on the other. In ancient Greece, sleep could be more than a bodily need, it could be a sacred act. For those seeking healing, guidance, or divine favor, the night offered a pathway to the gods themselves. This practice, known as incubation, invited the faithful to spend the night within the sanctuary of a deity, waiting for a dream that would bring a cure or an answer. Among the most famous destinations for such sacred sleep were the temples of Asclepius, the god of medicine. Pilgrims traveled for days, sometimes weeks, to reach healing sanctuaries like Epidaurus, Kos, or Pergamon, before they were permitted to sleep in the Abaton, the quiet, enclosed chamber reserved for dream incubation. Visitors performed ritual purifications, bathing, fasting, and offering sacrifices. Once inside, they lay upon simple pallets or directly on the temple floor, surrounded by incense and the murmur of prayers. The hope was that Asclepius, or one of his divine messengers, would visit them in a dream. These visions could take many forms. The god himself might appear. A serpent, his sacred animal, might touch the dreamer, or symbolic scenes might unfold, their meanings to be interpreted by the temple priests. Reports from ancient inscriptions tell of miraculous cures, a blind man awakening with restored sight, a lame woman walking freely after a night in the Abaton, fevers broken, pains eased, in some cases. The dream did not deliver an instant cure, but instead provided instructions what herbs to gather, what exercises to perform, or what offerings to make. In this way, Greek healing sleep was not passive rest but an active journey, crossing into the realm of the divine, where the mind was open and the gods could speak. The sleeper awoke, not just refreshed, but changed, carrying with them the conviction that the night itself could be a healer. In the homes of ancient Greece, the mattress was as much a marker of comfort as it was of status. While the simplest bedding could be rolled and stored in the corner of a small room, wealthier households displayed mattresses and bed frames as part of the home's pride, objects to be admired as well as slept upon. The most basic Greek bed might consist of a tightly woven mat of reeds or rushes, providing a firm, breathable surface suited to the warm Mediterranean climate. For more comfort, these mats could be layered with woolen blankets or animal skins. The next step up was a mattress filled with straw, which was light, easy to move, and could be replaced seasonally to keep it fresh. In wealthier homes, mattresses became thicker and softer. They were stuffed with wool for warmth, feathers for a luxurious springiness, or a mix of both. The covers could be made of linen in summer and heavier woolen cloth in winter. Sometimes, mattresses were perfumed with herbs like lavender or thyme, not only for fragrance but also to repel insects. The frame beneath these mattresses, called the cline, was often made of wood and could be plain or elaborately carved. Ropes or leather strips stretched across the frame to form the bed's base, creating a flexible support that was far more forgiving than a hard platform. These beds were not just for sleeping. In the Greek tradition, clines were also used for reclining during meals or gatherings, blurring the line between rest, leisure, and social ritual. The mattress, therefore, was more than a nighttime companion. It was part of a daily rhythm of comfort, conversation, and hospitality in the quiet hours. Whether the bed was a humble mat or a feather-filled cushion, it served the same ancient purpose: to soften the weight of the body and invite the mind toward the world of dreams. In the Mediterranean world, the sun dictated more than the seasons, it shaped the hours themselves. In Greece, as in many warm climates, the day was arranged around the power of the midday heat. By late morning, the rising sun could turn the whitewashed streets into mirrors of light, the air thick and slow. In such conditions, continuing work through the hottest hours was not only unpleasant, but unwise. The solution was the messimeria pause in the day, often spent in quiet rest. Farmers left their fields, craftsmen put down their tools, and markets slowed to a near halt. In towns and villages, shutters were drawn, creating dim, cool rooms where families could lie down and recover from the morning's labor. This midday rest was not necessarily deep sleep. For some, it was a brief napa, way to restore energy before returning to the day's work. For others, especially during summer's height, it could stretch into a full siesta, with the main meal of the day moved to the cooler evening hours. The practice made practical sense in a land where physical labor often took place outdoors, but it also reflected a philosophy of balance. Time was not seen purely as a resource to be spent, but as something to be lived in rhythm with nature. The body, like the fields, had its seasons, each day times for labor, times for nourishment, and times for stillness. When the worst heat had passed, the streets would come alive again. Merchants reopened their stalls, children spilled into courtyards, and conversations carried through the twilight. The midday rest was over, but it had given shape to the day, an ancient reminder that rest, like work, had its rightful place in the flow of life. For the philosophers of ancient Greece, sleep was more than a daily necessity, was a subject worthy of inquiry. Both Aristotle and Plato saw in the quiet hours of rest an opportunity to explore the nature of the soul, the body, and the mind's relationship to the cosmos. Plato, ever concerned with the moral and intellectual life, approached sleep as a mirror of the soul's state. In his dialogues, he suggested that a disciplined and virtuous person would enjoy peaceful dreams, while those who let their appetites and desires run wild in waking life would be plagued by restless visions. To Plato, the mind did not stop working. In sleep, simply turned inward, revealing truths about character and hidden desires. Aristotle, more inclined toward observation and natural science, wrote extensively about sleep and dreams in his treatises on sleep and sleeplessness and on dreams. He argued that sleep was a physical necessity, a time for the body to recover and restore balance. Dreams, in his view, were not divine messages but the byproduct of the body's internal movements, impressions left over from waking senses, rearranged by the resting mind. Despite these differences, both philosophers agreed that sleep was essential for a healthy life. A mind deprived of rest could not think clearly, and a body without proper sleep could not serve the higher aims of reason or virtue. In their own ways, Plato and Aristotle placed sleep within the same continuum as learning, reflection, and moral growth. To the Greek philosopher, a well-spent night was not merely one without disturbance, it was one that prepared the mind for truth and the body for action. In this, rest was not a retreat from life's purpose, but a quiet ally in its pursuit. In ancient Greece, the symposium was more than a meal, it was a social and intellectual event. Part feast, part debate, part performance. Guests reclined on clines arranged in a circle or semicircle, sipping wine, listening to music, reciting poetry, or engaging in spirited philosophical exchanges. The atmosphere could range from refined to riotous, depending on the host, the guests, and the vintage of the wine. These gatherings often stretched late into the night. Lamps burned low, the air thick with the scent of oil, incense, and drink. Over time, as cups were refilled and speeches grew more meandering, a different sound sometimes joined the lyre and laughter. The steady rhythm of someone drifting into sleep, snoring at a symposium, was a sign that the body had claimed its due. No matter how elevated the conversation, it might provoke gentle teasing or serve as a signal that the night's debates had run their course. In comedic plays, a drunken sleeper was often portrayed as an object of both mockery and affection, proof that even philosophers and poets could succumb to the same simple human needs as farmers and sailors. Some hosts provided extra blankets or cushions for guests who did not make it home before dawn. Others saw sleeping at a symposium as poor form, a sign of overindulgence. Either way, the phenomenon was common enough to be woven into Greek literature, art, and humor. In these moments, the high ideals of the symposium, wisdom, wit, and conviviality, the universal truth that no mind, however sharp, can outlast the call of sleep. Beneath the laughter and the verses, the soft rumble of a snore was a reminder that even in a culture famed for its intellect, the body always had the final word. In the bustling cities of the Roman world, the bedroom known as the cubiculum was more than a place to sleep. It was a carefully designed retreat, shaped by Roman ideas about privacy, status, and domestic life. Unlike the large, open rooms of Greek homes, cubicula were typically small enclosed spaces, often situated off the atrium or along quieter corridors of the house. Their modest size helped them stay warm in winter and cool in summer, but it also reflected a Roman preference for intimacy in sleeping quarters. The furnishings of a cubiculum varied widely with wealth. In poorer homes, a simple wooden frame with a straw-filled mattress sufficed, perhaps topped with a woolen blanket. In wealthier households, beds might be elaborately carved, with headboards adorned in ivory or bronze. Mattresses were filled with wool, feathers, or even imported down, and draped with linens dyed in rich colors. Privacy was a prized feature. Thick curtains or wooden doors separated the bedroom from public spaces, and some cubicula had no windows at all, insulating them from noise and light. In villas, these rooms sometimes opened onto private gardens, where the murmur of water and the scent of flowers offered a natural lullaby. But the cubiculum was not always reserved for sleeping. In the Roman day, it could also serve as a space for quiet conversation, reading, or intimate business dealings. Guests of high rank might be invited to meet in a host's bedroom, blurring the lines between public and private life. In this way, Roman bedrooms were not merely functional, they were architectural statements, reflecting the owner's taste, resources, and view of rest itself. For the Romans, sleep was not just the absence of activity. It was a cultivated experience, sheltered within walls designed to keep the world at bay. To the Romans, the bed was not merely a place for sleep, was a stage for comfort, display, and even prestige. From modest homes to imperial palaces, the lectus could reveal as much about its owner as their clothing or tableware. Roman beds were typically higher than Greek clines, often elevated on carved wooden legs or metal supports. The height allowed for airflow, keeping sleepers cool in summer, and created storage space beneath, sometimes for bedding, sometimes for valuables. Climbing into bed could require a small step or stool, especially for the more elaborate frames found in wealthy households. The mattresses themselves varied in quality. Ordinary citizens might use a simple sack stuffed with straw or chaff, while the affluent slept on cushions filled with wool feathers or imported down. The most luxurious bedding materials came from far corners of the empire. Fine Egyptian linen sheets, brightly dyed wool blankets from Gaul, and even silks brought overland from China. Pillows, often numerous, could be filled with softer down and covered in embroidered cases. Bedspreads and coverlets might be woven with intricate patterns, sometimes depicting mythological scenes, a touch of art to accompany the sleeper's dreams. For the wealthy, the bed was also a place for receiving visitors, reading, or dining in private. The lectus cubicularis bedroom bed was distinct from the lectus triclinioris dining couch, but both were part of a Roman lifestyle that blurred the boundaries between rest, leisure, and social life. Even in death, the bed retained its symbolism. Funerary art sometimes depicted the deceased reclining on a bed, suggesting eternal rest in comfort. In life and beyond, the Roman bed was a personal sanctuary, one where craftsmanship, trade, and human longing for ease came together beneath the sheets. In the Roman world, the day often ended not with a rush to bed, but with a slow descent into rest guided by water, warmth, and ritual. The Thermae, Rome's public baths, were more than places to wash. They were social centers, health retreats, and, for many, the final stop before home and sleep. Evening bathers might begin in the palestra, engaging in light exercise to loosen the body. From there, they would move through a carefully designed sequence: the warm tepidarium, the hot caldarium, and finally the cool plunge of the frigidarium. This ritual alternation of temperatures was believed to cleanse the skin, refresh the senses, and prepare the body for deep rest. Scent played its part. Bathhouses and private homes alike used oils infused with rose, lavender, myrtle, or frankincense. These oils were massaged into the skin after bathing, both as a luxury and as a guard against the dry Roman air. The combination of heat, fragrance, and massage loosened muscle tension and slowed the heartbeat, a natural prelude to sleep. After the baths, many Romans would enjoy a light evening meal, often fruit, cheese, and bread, before retiring to their cubiculum. The wealthier might have attendants prepared their bed with fresh linens or warmed blankets in winter. Lamps were dimmed, shutters drawn, and the quiet of the night embraced. This evening ritual mirrored the Roman philosophy that health was not simply the absence of illness, but the balance of body, mind, and environment. Just as the empire itself was ordered and engineered, so too could rest be cultivated through deliberate, pleasurable steps. For those who followed this rhythm, the transition from bustling forum to hushed bedroom was seamless, the body slipping into sleep as smoothly as it had sunk into the warm waters of the caldarium. In the Roman imagination, dreams were not idle fictions of the mind. They could be messages from the gods, omens of victory, or warnings of disaster. For emperors, whose lives were entwined with the fate of the empire, such visions could carry extraordinary weight. From Augustus to Constantine, imperial biographies are dotted with tales of nighttime revelations. Augustus himself claimed that his mother Atia dreamed she was visited by a serpent before his birth, a sign interpreted as divine favor. The historian Suetonius recounts how this story, repeated often, helped cement Augustus's image as a ruler chosen by fate. Other emperors were more anxious about their dreams. Caligula, prone to paranoia, reportedly consulted dream interpreters frequently, fearing signs of betrayal or assassination. Septimius Severus, before becoming emperor, dreamt of being embraced by a bearded figure, vision later linked to the god Serapis, suggesting divine approval of his rule. Dream interpretation was not a casual pastime. Professional oneirocrici. Dream interpreters operated in Rome, trained in both Greek and local traditions, and their counsel could influence political decisions. Some emperors postponed journeys, altered military plans, or even executed rivals based on ominous dreams. But dreams could also be tools of political theater. A ruler might receive a convenient vision to justify a controversial act, from declaring war to adopting an heir. By framing a decision as divinely inspired, an emperor not only claimed legitimacy but shielded himself from criticism. After all, who could argue with the gods? In an empire where power was as much about perception as policy, the private visions of the night could ripple outward to shape public events. Whether genuine or staged, these dreams blurred the line between personal rest and imperial destiny, making the bedchamber a silent stage for the politics of the ancient world. The Romans, for all their engineering marvels and imperial ambitions, never lost their taste for the small absurdities of daily life, and snoring was among them. In plays, poems, and casual graffiti, the sound of someone rattling away in their sleep was a reliable source of humor. Comic playwrights like Plautus and Terence sometimes slipped snoring into their stage directions, using it as a cue for slapstick. A servant might fall asleep on duty, his loud breathing interrupting a romantic scene or a whispered conspiracy. The audience, familiar with the sound from their own crowded households, needed no further explanation. In satire, writers like Juvenal and Martial poked fun at those who kept their bedfellows or their neighbors awake. Martial, with his razor wit, once quipped about a man whose snoring was so fierce it shook the bed like a passing cart, a familiar urban nuisance in tightly packed insulae apartment buildings. Snoring was not always a joke at another's expense. It could also be some inscriptions on tavern walls feature boasts like "I drank," "I sang," "I slept," "I snored," blending braggadocio with humor. In the convivial, communal sleeping arrangements of soldiers' barracks, snoring became a shared trial, a minor hardship that cemented camaraderie. Even emperors were not immune to the jest. One anecdote tells of a senator who fell asleep during a tedious speech in the Senate and began snoring audibly, prompting a ripple of suppressed laughter. The speaker, undeterred, remarked that at least someone in the chamber had been persuaded into dreams, if not into agreement. In a culture that prized rhetoric, discipline, and social grace, the involuntary rumble of a snore was a gentle reminder that beneath the togas and titles, Romans were human, and nothing brought that point home like the night's most democratic sound, heard from the humblest tavern to the grandest palace. In the ancient Indian tradition of Ayurveda, sleep, nidra, was more than a biological necessity, was one of the three pillars of health, alongside diet, ahara, and balanced living, brahmacharya. Proper rest was seen as essential not only for the body's repair, but also for mental clarity and spiritual well-being. Ayurvedic texts, such as the Charaka Samhita and Sushruta Samhita, offered precise guidance on when, how, and even in which direction to sleep. Timing was central. The ideal bedtime was said to follow the body's natural rhythms, with rest beginning before midnight to align with the cooling, restorative kapha phase of the night. Sleeping too late or during the wrong times of day was believed to disrupt the balance of the dasha's bodily energies. Posture, too, carried meaning. Side sleeping was generally preferred, with the right side favored after a heavy meal to aid digestion, and the left side recommended for comfort and heart health. Sleeping on the stomach was discouraged as it was thought to strain the organs and disturb breathing. Diet played a quiet but influential role. A light, warm evening meal, such as rice, milk, or gently spiced vegetables, was advised to calm the mind and avoid indigestion, which could disturb sleep. Heavy, oily, or excessively spicy foods were believed to provoke restlessness or cause vivid, unsettling dreams. Ayurveda also integrated the mind into the sleep equation. Mental peace before bed was essential, achieved through evening rituals like oil massage, abhyanga, meditation, or the chanting of calming mantras. These practices were thought to quiet the senses, preparing both body and spirit for the transition into nidra. By linking posture, timing, and diet into a holistic framework, Ayurveda treated sleep not as an isolated act but as the natural consequence of a life in balance. In this worldview, to rest well was to live in harmony with one's own body, the cycles of nature, and the subtle rhythms of the universe. Long before electric fans or air conditioning, ancient cultures developed simple but effective solutions to the challenge of sleeping in warm, humid climates. From the reed mats of the Indus Valley to the string cots of tropical Asia, these designs blended local materials, climate wisdom, and centuries of refinement in the Indian subcontinent. The Sharpaya wooden frame laced with cotton ropes was a masterpiece of practical design. Elevated above the ground, it allowed for air circulation underneath, keeping sleepers cooler and away from crawling insects. The taut ropes provided a gentle give, distributing weight evenly for comfort, without the heat-trapping bulk of a mattress. For those who preferred to sleep closer to the earth, woven mats made from palm leaves, bamboo strips, or jute offered another cooling solution. Thin and breathable, these mats were rolled out only at night, helping floors stay uncluttered during the day. Their natural fibers absorbed little heat, and they could be easily carried for travel or outdoor sleeping during especially hot nights. Canopies, fabric hung from above, served a dual purpose. In tropical zones, they were essential for keeping mosquitoes and other insects at bay. But they also softened the air by diffusing breezes and offering shade from moonlight or early morning sun. Some were simple cotton drapes. Others, in wealthier homes, were adorned with embroidery or dyed with plant-based colors. In regions with pronounced seasonal heat, sleeping arrangements shifted with the calendar. People might move from enclosed rooms in winter to open courtyards or rooftops in summer, taking their mats, cots, and canopies with them. Nighttime became not just a retreat from the heat, but a time for stargazing, storytelling, and communal rest under the open sky. These humble, breathable designs remind us that comfort in hot climates was never about sealing oneself. Await was about working with the air, the night, and the materials at hand to create a space where the body could truly cool, relax, and drift into sleep. In the Vedic worldview, dreams were not mere byproducts of the mind, they were potential bridges to the antariksha, the subtle space between the earthly and the divine. The Rigveda and Atharvaveda, two of the oldest surviving texts in the Indo-Aryan tradition, make passing yet significant references to dreams as moments when the soul could receive guidance, omens, or even warnings. Vedic philosophy saw life as operating on three primary states of consciousness: Jagrat waking, Swapna dreaming, and Sushupti deep sleep. The dreaming state was considered a liminal zone, neither bound by the senses nor fully dissolved into unconsciousness. In this state, the self-Atman could access realms beyond physical perception, encountering symbolic visions, ancestral spirits, or glimpses of cosmic truths. Not all dreams were treated equally. Ancient dream interpreters, often learned priests or sages, categorized them into auspicious and inauspicious, transient and prophetic. A dream of light, flying, or meeting revered figures might be seen as a sign of spiritual blessing or imminent success. Conversely, visions of fire, falling, or broken objects could signal danger or the need for ritual purification. The Upanishads deepened this philosophy, teaching that in dreams the soul roams freely, creating and experiencing worlds shaped by its karmic impressions. Some teachings suggested that these visions were not random, but reflections of deeper desires, fears, or lessons yet to be learned. The dreaming mind, in this view, was a theater where both the divine and the personal could perform. Dream rituals were not uncommon. If a vision felt significant, it might prompt offerings to specific deities, recitation of protective mantras, or consultations with a learned Brahmin. In royal courts, kings sometimes sought such interpretations before major decisions, ensuring their actions aligned not only with counsel from ministers, but also with perceived cosmic will, in the Vedic sense. To dream was to momentarily loosen the knots binding human perception to the physical plane. Each night held the possibility that the sleeper's consciousness might step beyond the visible world, returning at dawn with whispers from higher realms. In much of South and Southeast Asia, the arrival of the monsoon is both a relief and a disruption. After weeks or months of sweltering heat, the air cools, the parched earth drinks deeply, and life surges back in green abundance. But with the downpour comes a new rhythm of night swans defined by the constant drumming of rain, the scent of wet soil, and the occasional flash of lightning illuminating a half-lit room. Sleeping during the monsoon required adaptation. In rural villages, where walls might be of bamboo or mud, the sound of rain could be overwhelming, an unbroken percussive blanket that muffled other noises. Roof leaks were a perennial hazard. Mats and cots were often shifted to drier corners, and low, waterproof stools might be placed beneath beds to keep belongings above the pooling water. The monsoon also influenced sleeping posture and location. In many households, people gathered in the driest, most sheltered room, sleeping side by side. In some regions, verandas or open courtyards, or hot season sleeping, were abandoned for the safety of enclosed interiors. Yet in sturdier homes with tiled or thatched roofs, many welcomed the monsoon's night air, cooler and heavier with humidity, and slept soundly to the hypnotic rhythm of the storm. Cultural practices often wove the season into nightly routines. In Kerala, elders might tell children that thunder was the sound of gods churning the heavens, turning an otherwise frightening noise into a cosmic lullaby. In Bengal, folk songs timed to the rains spoke of longing, love, and journeys delayed, becoming the soundtrack to the storm's night's dot. Practical adjustments, too, were essential. Woolen blankets were replaced with lighter cottons to prevent dampness from clinging. Mosquito nets were more carefully maintained, as stagnant water from the rains encouraged swarms. And in areas prone to flooding, sleepers remained alert to sudden rises in water levels, sometimes shifting their rest to lofted platforms or upper floors. For all its inconveniences, the monsoon brought a rare kind of intimacy to the night. The shared shelter, the mingled sense of rain and earth, and the steady beat of water on rooftops created a cocooning world, one where dreams floated easily, as though carried on the currents of the storm itself. Across many ancient cultures, the act of going to bed was not simply about finding physical rest, it was a spiritual transition, a gentle closing of the day's chapter. In India, Tibet, and parts of Southeast Asia, night chants and mantras were woven into the rhythm of life, offering peace to the mind, protection to the sleeper, and gratitude to the divine. In the Vedic tradition, evening prayers Sandhya Vandanam were performed at dusk, often followed by the recitation of mantras like the Gayatri or verses from the Rig Veda. These were believed to purify the mind, release the emotional weight of the day, and align the self with cosmic order. Rita. Chanting was not just vocal, it was a breath discipline, a slowing of the body's rhythms to prepare for rest. Buddhist monasteries followed their own nightly rituals. Monks might gather in the dimly lit prayer hall, the air scented with incense, to chant sutras, or repeat the calming syllables of Om Mani Padme. This repetitive rhythm created a meditative state, dissolving stray thoughts before the long, early hours of monastic sleep. In some traditions, these chants were also considered a way to guard against unsettling dreams or negative spiritual influences during the night. In Japan, Zen practitioners might close the day with the Heart Sutra, or a silent period of Zen meditation, treating the transition to sleep as a continuation of mindfulness. Similarly, Tibetan lay people might softly turn prayer wheels by lamplight before lying down, letting their last thoughts be of compassion and the impermanence of life. Even outside organized religion, folk traditions carried their own night invocations. In rural India, mothers sang low devotional songs to children, blending lullabies with prayers to local deities for safety. Some families would recite protective verses at the doorway before retiring, symbolically sealing the home for the night. The power of these night chants lay in their constancy. Just as the sun's setting marked the day's physical end, the chant marked its spiritual closure. For the sleeper, it was a final act of intentionality, sending the mind into the quiet dark with words of faith, protection, and peace. In traditional Chinese philosophy, sleep was not merely a biological need, it was a daily restoration of cosmic balance. According to classical Taoist and medical texts, the body is a microcosm of the universe, and its health depends on the continual interplay of yin and yang, the two complementary forces that govern all existence. Yin represents darkness, coolness, stillness, and receptivity. Yang embodies light, warmth, activity, and outward expression. Daytime is dominated by yang, as the body engages in work, movement, and interaction. Nighttime, by contrast, belongs to yin, when the mind and body turn inward to restore vitality. Sleep was seen as the moment when yang energy withdrew into the yin to be replenished. Traditional Chinese medicine (TCM) taught that disrupting this cycle by staying awake deep into the night or sleeping through much of the morning could unbalance the energies, leading to fatigue, irritability, or even long-term illness. Ideally, rest began not long after nightfall, when yin was ascending, and ended near sunrise. As yang began to rise again, the sleeping environment, too, was shaped by these principles. A bedroom should be quiet, cool, and uncluttered, conditions that encourage yin. Strong light, excessive noise, or emotional agitation before bed were believed to invite excessive yang, making it harder to drift into deep, restorative rest. Posture also played a role. Many sources recommended sleeping on the right side, allowing the heart to rest lightly and the body's energy channels meridians to remain open. The head was ideally placed toward the east, aligning the sleeper with the rising yang of morning and away from direct drafts, which could disturb qi, the body's vital energy. In Taoist practice, certain breathing exercises or meditative visualizations were performed before sleep, gently guiding yang inward. These quiet rituals helped settle the mind, ensuring that dreams would be harmonious rather than restless, a sign that the energies were in proper balance. In this worldview, sleep was not just a personal habit, but a nightly reenactment of the universe's eternal dance, yang retreating, yin embracing, and the two merging in the silent work of renewal. In ancient China, the art of sleeping well was closely tied to the changing seasons. Comfort was not a fixed arrangement, but a careful adaptation to temperature, humidity, and the balance of yin and yang, from the cold winds of winter to the heavy humidity of summer. Households changed not only their bedding, but the very texture of their rest. Silk, prized for its softness and breathability, was the favored bedding material for the wealthy. In winter, thick silk quilts were layered over the sleeper, offering warmth without the heaviness of wool. Silk sheets were cool to the touch, yet retained body heat, making them a luxurious year-round option for those who could afford them. The luster of silk also carried social prestige. Its presence in a bedchamber hinted at refinement, wealth, and a household connected to the empire's thriving textile trade. Summer brought a different strategy. Bamboo mats, woven from thin slats and polished smooth, replaced soft bedding in many homes. Their naturally cool surface helped draw heat away from the body, and some households even sprinkled water lightly over them before lying down. In humid southern regions, bamboo mats were essential. Without them, the combination of heat and moisture made sleep nearly impossible. The shift from silk to bamboo was not purely about comfort. It also reflected ideas in traditional Chinese medicine. about aligning the body with seasonal qi. In winter, the body needed to conserve warmth and protect its yang energy. In summer, it was important to release excess heat and avoid trapping yin dampness, even among commoners. Seasonal adjustments were common. Cotton or hemp sheets replaced silk, and simple reed mats stood in for bamboo. While these lacked the prestige of elite materials, they served the same purpose, helping the sleeper's body remain in harmony with the environment. This seasonal bedding cycle was so ingrained that it became part of household rituals. Families stored their silk sheets in cedar chests at the start of summer, bringing out the bamboo mats with a faint scent of grass and resin. Months later, as the first chill entered the air, the silk returned soft, warm, and a quiet reminder that winter had begun. In the courts of ancient China, an emperor's dreams were never treated as idle fancy. They were potential messages from heaven Tian, reflections of cosmic harmony or discord. And in a society where the ruler's legitimacy was tied to the mandate of heaven, such visions could carry the weight of dynastic fate. When an emperor experienced a striking dream, it often became the concern of more than his private attendants. Court historians, Taoist sages, Buddhist monks, and Confucian scholars might all be summoned to interpret its meaning. These advisors drew upon a deep reservoir of sources from the Zhou Li rites of Zhou and the Zuo Juan, to dream manuals that linked specific images with omens of prosperity, disaster, or change in the realm. An auspicious dream might feature dragons, phoenixes, or a sky free of cloud, symbols of harmony between heaven and earth. Such visions could be used to reassure the court, justify a new policy, or strengthen the ruler's image as a divinely favored leader. On the other hand, troubling dreams, storms over the capital, eclipsed moons, collapsing walls were taken as warnings of unrest, rebellion, or moral failings in governance. Some emperors used their dreams as instruments of power. By announcing a heaven-sent vision, they could frame controversial decisions, such as raising taxes, declaring war, or naming a successor as responses to divine instruction. Others, however, were genuinely uneasy, ordering rites, sacrifices, or public pardons to counteract perceived celestial displeasure. Interpreting an imperial dream was both a political and a personal risk. An advisor who spoke too boldly might incur the emperor's wrath. One who flattered too obviously might be dismissed as insincere. The most skilled interpreters wove their readings carefully, balancing reverence for the ruler with fidelity to tradition. In the grand halls of the Forbidden City or earlier palaces, these nocturnal visions could ripple outward to shape laws, diplomacy, and even the fate of entire provinces. A dream, once spoken aloud, could set armies marching or halt them in their tracks. For the emperor, sleep was never simply rest. It was a nightly audience with the unseen powers that governed the empire. In many ancient cities, the night was not a time of true stillness. While most citizens lay in rest, a small, watchful corps remained awake. The city guard, tasked with maintaining order, enforcing curfews, and guarding gates and walls against thieves, fire, and intruders. The midnight watch was often divided into shifts, ensuring that the city remained under constant vigilance from sunset to sunrise. In Rome, the vigils patrolled streets with lanterns, water buckets, and clubs, ready to quell both crime and the ever-present threat of fire. In China's walled capitals, night patrols were organized into drum-marked intervals, with each change of shift announced by the rhythmic beat of a watchman's drum or the striking of a gong. Curfews were more than just suggestions, they were an essential part of urban safety. In Athens, a city accustomed to both philosophical debate and political unrest, certain periods of crisis saw the imposition of strict curfews, with patrols ensuring that citizens stayed indoors after a set hour. In medieval Kyoto and Chang'an before it, city gates were locked each evening, cutting off travel and trade until morning. Even within the walls, market streets and taverns were shuttered, and anyone wandering at odd hours risked questioning or arrest. For the guards themselves, the work was physically demanding and often thankless. The cold hours between midnight and dawn were the hardest time seemed to move slowly, the air grew damp, and the temptation to doze was constant. In winter, watchmen huddled near braziers. In summer, they relied on the small relief of moving through cooler alleys. Despite the strictness of these measures, not all nocturnal activity was illicit. Messengers carrying urgent state documents, physicians summoned to a patient, and priests preparing for pre-dawn rituals might receive special passes to move about during the curfew. But these exceptions were rare, and the city at night was a world apart from its bustling daylight self-quiet, shadowed and under the steady gaze of those whose rest came only with the morning. In this way, the midnight watch served as the city's heartbeat during its most vulnerable hours, ensuring that while most citizens dreamed, the walls held strong and the streets remained, at least in theory, safe. For much of history, what one drank before bed was more than a matter of taste, it was a subject of health advice, social etiquette, and, in some cases, outright disagreement. In ancient China, where tea culture blossomed during the Tang dynasty, scholars, monks, and physicians held differing opinions on whether the fragrant brew belonged in the evening routine. Some praised tea's calming properties. Lightly brewed green tea, they argued, could help settle the mind, aid digestion, and prepare the spirit for restful dreams. In monasteries, evening tea was a gentle ritual, shared in silence before retiring to one's mat. Taoist texts sometimes linked tea to a clarity of heart that could make dream visions more harmonious. Others, however, warned against its stimulating effects. Medical treatises within the framework of traditional Chinese medicine noted that tea's cooling and slightly bitter nature could disrupt the balance of yin and yang if taken too late. Especially in cold weather, physicians sometimes cautioned that drinking tea at night might scatter the spirit and lead to shallow, restless sleep. The debate wasn't limited to China. In the Middle East, herbal infusions such as mint or chamomile were more commonly praised for bedtime use, while coffee, arriving from Ethiopia and Yemen centuries later, was quickly recognized as unsuitable for pre-sleep hours. In Greece and Rome, wine mixed with herbs or honey was often considered the ideal nightcap, believed to relax muscles and quiet the mind. But even in ancient times, personal preference often trumped doctrine. Farmers who rose before dawn might forego tea entirely, preferring a cup of warm millet gruel before bed. Scholars burning the midnight oil on philosophical treatises might deliberately drink stronger tea to extend their study hours, accepting the cost of a later bedtime. In the end, The question of tea before bed was as much about the sleeper's needs as the drink itself. For some, it was a comfort. For others, a subtle thief of rest. And so, in every era, the debate brewed on quietly into the night. For the ancient Maya, sleep was not simply rest, it was a passage into a sacred dimension where the boundaries between the human and divine could be crossed. Dreams were considered messages from the gods, ancestors, and supernatural beings. And the act of sleeping itself was sometimes prepared as one might prepare for a religious ceremony. Mayan cosmology envisioned the universe as layered, with the waking world merely one plane of existence. To dream was to travel beyond it, venturing into realms where deities and spirit guides resided. Skilled dreamers, often priests, shamans, or elders, were trained to interpret symbols and encounters, reading them as prophecies or guidance for the community. Nighttime rituals often preceded these journeys. Before sleep, an individual might burn copal incense to purify the space and attract benevolent spirits. Offerings of maize, cacao, or flowers could be placed near the sleeping mat, as gestures of respect to the dream gods. In some accounts, the sleeper would drink a light cacao infusion, believed to strengthen the heart and sharpen the mind's vision in the dream realm. Sacred dreams were sought not only for personal insight, but for collective benefit. A ruler might consult a dream interpreter before a major political decision, or a shaman might enter sleep with the explicit intent of finding the cause of an illness afflicting the village. Certain temples, adorned with carved depictions of dream animals and celestial beings, were thought to be especially powerful places to sleep, acting as gateways to the other world. The Maya also recognized the danger in dreams. Not all spirits were benevolent, and nightmares could be seen as signs of spiritual imbalance or a curse. Protective charms such as carved jade amulets or painted glyphs were sometimes kept by the bed to ward off harmful forces. In this worldview, sleep was not passive but participatory. Every dream was a dialogue, every vision a potential omen. For the Maya, the night was an open sky in which the soul could fly on. Sacred dreams were the wings. In the heart of the Aztec Empire, Tenochtitlan was a city that rarely stood still. Its canals bustled with traders, marketplaces overflowed with goods, and religious ceremonies filled the calendar. Amid such activity, rest was essential, but it had to be carefully woven into the rhythm of urban life. For most Aztec commoners, sleep was segmented rather than continuous. The day began before sunrise, often with household chores or trips to the market. Laborers and farmers would rise early, work through the morning, and rest briefly in the afternoon when the tropical sun was at its peak. This midday pause, a practical counterpart to the Mediterranean siesta, allowed the body to recover before the cooler hours of the late day's work. The main night's sleep typically began after the evening meal and household rituals, which might include storytelling, prayer to the household gods, or simple maintenance tasks. In larger households, mats or reed beds were arranged in shared spaces, with family members sleeping close together for warmth and safety. In wealthier homes, private rooms offered greater comfort and quieter nights. Religious observances sometimes disrupted these patterns. Priests and participants in certain ceremonies might be called to midnight offerings, vigils, or drumming that continued until dawn. The great festivals like those honoring Huitzilopochtli or Tlacacut fill the night with music, chanting, and the flicker of countless torches. City life also meant adapting to noise. In a place where thousands lived in close quarters, the sounds of dogs barking, boats gliding through canals, and distant drums were part of the nocturnal soundscape. Skilled sleepers learned to drift off despite the commotion. Others embraced the noise as part of the city's heartbeat. For the Aztecs, rest was not an escape from their bustling world but a way to remain strong within it. The ebb and flow of their sleep reflected the pulse of Tenochtitlan itself, a city alive at all hours, yet always finding moments for the body to recover and the spirit to prepare for another day in the empire's relentless rhythm. High in the Andes, where stone terraces clung to mountain slopes and the stars felt close enough to touch, the Incas and their predecessors developed sleeping practices uniquely suited to life at altitude. Nights here were not just cool, they could be bitterly cold, with temperatures dropping sharply after sunset. Even in the dry season, Inca homes, often constructed from stone with thatched roofs, retained the chill of the mountain air. To keep warm, families slept in close proximity, sometimes huddled together under heavy layers of woven llama or alpaca wool blankets. The dense fibers of these textiles trapped body heat, turning the bed into a small cocoon against the freezing night. The rhythm of rest was influenced by both climate and labor demands. Farmers, herders, and builders often rose before dawn to make use of the precious daylight. This meant early bedtimes with evenings spent around the hearth, sharing meals of maize or potatoes and listening to stories or songs. Candlelight was rare. Torches, or simple oil lamps, provided only enough illumination for essential tasks. Before sleep, altitude itself shaped rest. At over 3,000 meters, nearly 10,000 feet, thinner air could make breathing during sleep more labored, especially for newcomers. For lifelong mountain dwellers, however, the body adapted, with deeper, slower rhythms of rest. Travelers from lower regions sometimes reported vivid dreams at these elevations, perhaps spurred by the reduced oxygen or the eerie stillness of the mountains. The Incas saw the night sky as a living presence. Constellations, including dark cloud shapes formed by the Milky Way's dust lanes, were believed to influence agriculture and animal life. Sleeping under such a brilliant expanse, whether inside the home or in the open during journeys, was a nightly reminder of cosmic connection. In this way, Inca mountain nights were a blend of physical adaptation, communal warmth, and spiritual awareness, a rest that was both survival and ceremony, cradled in the arms of the Andes. Across the ancient world, certain individuals were believed to hold a rare gift, the ability to travel purposefully in dreams and return with knowledge, healing, or warnings. These dream shamans, found in cultures from the Siberian tundra to the Amazon rainforest, treated sleep not as a passive state but as a deliberate journey into the unseen. The work of a dream shaman often began before nightfall. Ritual preparations might include fasting, chanting, smudging the body with herbs, or lying upon special mats believed to connect the sleeper to spiritual realms. Some traditions used rhythmic drumming or rattling to guide the mind into a liminal state between wakefulness and sleep, a place where visions were more easily summoned. In this role, dreams were not random images, but purposeful encounters. A Shaman might meet spirit animals, ancestral guides, or deities who offered advice, revealed the source of an illness, or suggested remedies. In some cases, the shaman's dream was thought to be a battlefield, where they fought off harmful spirits on behalf of a patient. Healing through dreams could take many forms. A shaman might dream of a specific plant or mineral and then use it. In a cure upon waking, they might return with messages for an individual or an entire community, guidance on when to plant crops, warnings of natural disasters, or omens about war. These visions were taken seriously. Communities often held public gatherings where a shaman would recount their dream in detail, with elders interpreting symbols and determining actions. In some cultures, dream journeys were considered as authoritative as physical observation, binding the group to follow the guidance received. The respect for dream shamans was immense, but so was the burden. They carried the responsibility of navigating unseen worlds where danger and deception could lurk. Failure to interpret a vision correctly might bring misfortune, and repeated journeys into the dream realm were said to take a toll on the shaman's health and energy. To these ancient peoples, the dream world was not an illusion, it was another dimension of reality. And the dream shaman was both traveler and messenger, walking the bridge between the sleeping body and the waking world. For countless generations, before brick hearths or modern heating, the fire was more than a cooking tool, it was the heart of the night. In tribal communities around the world, a fire burning through the darkness was a source of warmth, light, safety, and companionship, shaping how and where people rested. In cold or temperate climates, night fires were essential for survival. Families and entire clans might sleep in a circle or semicircle around the flames, arranging themselves so the youngest and most vulnerable were closest to the heat. Sleeping mats, furs, or woven blankets were spread on the ground, with embers carefully tended to last until dawn. The fire's role went beyond temperature. Its glow kept predators at bay, the flicker and smoke acting as deterrents for wolves, big cats, and snakes. In some African and Australian Aboriginal communities, fires were placed at the edge of sleeping areas in multiple small circles, forming a protective barrier. Culturally, the fire was also a gathering point. As darkness fell, stories were told, songs were sung, and elders passed down knowledge under the soft, rhythmic crackle of wood. These moments eased the mind before sleep, turning the night into a time for bonding as much as resting. Tending the fire was both a responsibility and a trust. Certain members of the group Afan, the young, or those who couldn't join nighttime hunts, turns feeding the flames, ensuring it never went out. In some traditions, the night fire was sacred, believed to carry prayers or dreams upward. In its smoke, the smell of wood smoke, the heat against chilled skin, and the sight of sparks drifting into the black sky created a sensory landscape that marked the transition to rest. For many tribal communities, to sleep without a fire nearby was not just uncomfortable, it was unthinkable. In this way, the night fire was more than a physical comfort. It was a living presence, a guardian of warmth, light, and the quiet safety needed for dreams to unfold. In ancient Nubia, where the Nile carved a green ribbon through an otherwise arid land, nights were shaped by the interplay of water and desert. Rest here meant adapting to both the river's gentle rhythms and the open expanses of sand and stone. Many Nubian villages hugged the banks of the Nile, where the day's heat was tempered by evening breezes. As the sun set, the air cooled quickly, carrying with it the scent of water reeds and silt. Families often gathered outdoors to talk, eat, or work by moonlight before drifting to sleep in shaded courtyards or simple reed shelters. For those who lived farther into the desert, the nights could be cooler still, sometimes even chilly. The day's heat radiated away into a sky unclouded by moisture, leaving stars that blazed with unusual clarity. People often slept on raised wooden frames or woven mats, keeping them above the shifting desert sands and away from insects. Riverbank rest brought its own unique soundtrack. Frogs croaked in the reeds, insects hummed, and the soft splash of water against boat hulls blended into the night. The occasional call of a water bird or the distant thump of a fisherman's oar punctuated the otherwise tranquil scene. Sleeping arrangements reflected both practicality and culture. In rural areas, extended families often slept together in open-air compounds, sharing thick woven blankets for warmth. Traders and travelers on river journeys might sleep aboard small wooden boats, moored close to shore, rocking gently on the current. Nubian nights were also times for quiet rituals. Some people offered small tokens or prayers to river spirits before sleep, asking for safe waters and plentiful fish. Others told folk tales that wove together desert legends and river myths, passing the time until dreams took hold. Here, rest was more than the absence of work. It was a nightly reunion with the land, the water, and the wind. The desert cooled the skin, the river lulled the senses, and the stars kept silent watch over those who slept between two worlds. For the Berber nomads of North Africa, the Sahara was both home and horizon, a land where the days blazed with heat and the nights unfolded in a vast dome of stars. Rest here was never confined to fixed walls. It was a practice woven into movement. Weather and the rhythms of caravan life travel often took place in the cool hours between dusk and dawn. So sleep was a flexible affair. Camps were set up quickly and efficiently, using woolen tents woven from goat hair, which resisted both wind and rain while allowing heat to escape. In warmer months, many preferred to sleep entirely in the open, their bedding rolled out on the firm sand or atop mats, with only a blanket to guard against the chill that descends after sunset. The desert sky was an ever-changing companion. Without city lights, the Milky Way arched overhead in astonishing clarity, and shooting stars were common. Many Berbers knew the constellations intimately, using them not just for navigation but as seasonal markers, guiding migration patterns and planting times. Sand was both friend and foe. By day it radiated the sun's heat. By night it cooled rapidly, making the air crisp. Winds could shift it suddenly, and experienced nomads often positioned themselves near natural windbreaks, rock outcrops, dunes, or tent walls. Blankets and cloaks were wrapped tightly to keep out drifting grains. Night in the Sahara was rarely silent. Camels grumbled in their hobbles, desert foxes padded unseen, and the wind sang low across the dunes. These sounds blended into a natural lullaby for those accustomed to them, marking the familiar heartbeat of desert life. For the Berbers, rest was not just recovery from the day's labor, was a moment of connection with their surroundings. The desert was never entirely still, but under the infinite canopy of stars. The nomad's bed, beat it a woven mat or the bare earth, was always a place of belonging. High in the Ethiopian highlands, where rugged peaks rise above deep valleys, the nights are as striking as the days. Even in a region close to the equator, altitude changes everything. Days can be warm and bright, but once the sun dips below the horizon, the air cools swiftly, bringing a mountain chill that seeps into the stones of the homes. Traditional highland houses, often circular and built from stone or wattle and daub, were designed to shelter families from both heat and cold. Thick walls trapped the warmth of the cooking fire, while small windows limited drafts. At night, people wrapped themselves in heavy wool blankets, known as gabas, large, hand-woven cloths that provided both insulation and comfort. Beds were sometimes simple wooden frames topped with straw or hide, but many slept on mats laid directly upon the smooth earthen floor, layering blankets generously to keep out the cold. The bedding was communal in many households, with multiple family members sharing warmth through the night. The sounds of highland nights carried differently. In the thin air, dogs barked in the distance, cows shifted in their pens, and, in certain seasons, church bells or drum beats from evening prayers drifted faintly across the hills. The rhythm of life here was closely tied to the Ethiopian Orthodox calendar, and many households ended the evening with quiet blessings before bed. In more remote villages, the flicker of a central hearth often served as the only light source. After sunset, its smoke curling up through a small hole in the roof. The fire was tended carefully. Too much heat and the room became stifling. Too little and the mountain cold crept in. To sleep in the Ethiopian highlands was to rest in a balance between warmth and crisp air, between the protective embrace of stone walls and the open vastness of the starlit sky. Each night was a reminder that even in warm latitudes, altitude could turn rest into an art of layering and shelter. Before the written word, and long before glowing screens, nightfall often meant gathering together to share stories. Across countless cultures, oral tradition was not just entertainment. It was a nightly ceremony, an anchor for community, and a gentle path from wakefulness to sleep. In small villages, desert camps, forest clearings, and mountain homes, the hours after sunset were the perfect time for tales. The day's work was done, the fire's warmth was steady, and the mind was ready to wander. Elders, parents, or skilled storytellers became the night's guides, drawing on memory to recite myths of creation, heroic epics, animal fables, or moral lessons. The rhythm of a storyteller's voice, slow, deliberate, and sometimes hypnotic, matched the winding pace of the tale. Listeners would lean in at moments of suspense, then relax as the plot softened into resolution. For children, these stories were as much a lullaby as they were a lesson, their eyelids growing heavier with each passing sentence. Storytelling also preserved identity. A single evening's tale could carry centuries of history, keeping genealogies, migration routes, and survival skills alive in memory. Some stories were meant only for certain times of year, others only told by specific people. In many traditions, to tell the wrong story at the wrong time was considered unlucky. The setting was as important as the words. A fire crackled in the background, insects sang, and shadows danced on walls or tent fabric. The storyteller's gestures became part of the magic, hands shaping mountains, eyes flashing with the villain's threat, voice dipping to a whisper. for secrets meant only for those present. By the time the story's final lines curled into the air, the group was often wrapped in a shared stillness. Some would drift to sleep right where they sat, others would carry the tale to their dreams. And in that soft borderland between waking and rest, the story didn't truly end it, simply moved into the realm of the imagination. For as long as people have dreamed, they have also feared what might come in the night. Across cultures, sleep was seen as a vulnerable state of time when the soul could wander. Spirits might visit, and unseen dangers could creep close. To guard against these threats, communities developed a rich tapestry of folk beliefs, rituals, and protective charms. In some traditions, the boundary between waking life and dreams was fragile, and the sleeper's spirit could be stolen, trapped, or harmed. To prevent this, protective objects were placed near the bed, iron tools to ward off malevolent beings, carved talismans to keep nightmares at bay, or sacred symbols drawn in ash or chalk around the sleeping area. Among nomadic tribes, protective rituals were often simple but powerful. A short prayer whispered before bed, the placing of a favored amulet beneath the pillow, or a ring of salt sprinkled around the bedding could offer reassurance. In parts of Africa and Asia, certain plants like lavender, rue, or holy basil were hung above sleeping mats to purify the air and repel both insects and evil spirits. Children were thought to need special care, their dreams seen as especially susceptible to interference. Cradle charms, beads, and small animal figures were tied to bed frames, not only to soothe the child but to act as spiritual guardians. In some places, lullabies themselves carried protective magic, with specific verses designed to confuse or scare away wandering spirits. Dream guardianship was also a communal act, a parent sitting watch over a sick child through the night, a village elder chanting protective words at dusk, or a group sleeping close together for safety. These were all part of the ancient pact between the waking and the sleeping. Even in places where spiritual explanations faded over time, some of the customs remained, woven into the quiet rituals of bedtime. Whether in the form of a dream catcher, a family prayer, or a trusted nightlight, the impulse is the same: to make the sleeper's journey into dreams a safe passage, guarded until morning. In the ancient world, the idea of a private sleeping space free from animals was rare. For most of history, humans shared their nights with creatures great and small, sometimes by choice, often by necessity. In rural homes and nomadic tents, livestock were not just valuable property. They were life itself. Goats, sheep, or calves might be brought indoors at night to protect them from predators or theft. Their body heat helped warm the room, especially during cold seasons. Chickens might roost in the rafters, their quiet rustling mingling with the night's other sounds. Pets, too, had a place in the bedroom. In some ancient societies, dogs were not only companions but guardians of the night, alert to danger while their humans slept. Cats, especially in Egypt, were welcome hunters, keeping mice and snakes at bay. Their presence was practical, but their purring or warmth also provided comfort. Not all animal company was welcome. Pests, fleas, lice, bedbugs, and rodents were constant companions in even the wealthiest households. Without modern pest control, nightly rest could be a battle against tiny intruders. People used herbs, ashes, and even smoke from the hearth to try to keep them away. In crowded urban quarters, animal sounds were part of the night's background. A horse stamping in a stable, dogs barking in distant alleys. The clink of cowbells outside of Calcige was a reminder that human and animal lives were tightly intertwined. While today many people think of animals in the bedroom as a beloved pet curling up on the duvet, in much of history, it was simply part of survival. The warmth, companionship, and even protection they provided outweighed the inconveniences, making them an inseparable part of the nightly rhythm of life. Snoring, it seems, is as old as sleep itself and just as certain to provoke annoyance. From ancient caves to royal chambers, the nighttime rumble of human breathing has left a trail of both creative remedies and enduring humor. The ancient Greeks, ever fond of commentary on human quirks, occasionally wove snoring into plays and comedies. Aristophanes made light of it in his theatrical works, portraying it as both a source of domestic irritation and an unavoidable part of life. Roman poets and satirists joined in, poking fun at bedfellows whose snores could rival thunder or marching soldiers. Ancient remedies ranged from the practical to the peculiar. The Egyptians suggested sleeping on one side and using elevated pillows of wood or stone to keep the airway open, an early form of what modern doctors might call positional therapy. In the Ayurvedic tradition of India, breathing exercises, herbal steam inhalations, and certain sleeping postures were prescribed to ease nighttime noise. The Romans, more inventive in their comfort, sometimes advised placing a cloth soaked in aromatic oils over the mouth or keeping the head cool with damp compresses. In rural communities around the world, spouses and family members relied on the oldest remedy of all, nudging, shaking, or, in some cases, banishing the offender to another sleeping space. Snoring also entered the realm of folklore. In some traditions, unusually loud snoring was seen as a sign of deep, healthy rest. In others, it was thought to leave the sleeper vulnerable to evil spirits, who could follow the sound into their dreams. And of course, in nearly every culture, it became a source of good-natured teasing, proof that even in the most serious moments, humans have always found ways to laugh at each other's nocturnal noises. In the end, snoring connects us across time. Whether in a Bronze Age hut, a Roman villa, or a modern apartment, the gentle or not-so-gentle rumble of sleep has been both a soundtrack to the night and a timeless reminder that rest in all its forms is deeply human. How a person sleeps is shaped by far more than personal comfort. It's a reflection of culture, health beliefs, available bedding, and even symbolism. Across history, side, back, and curled fetal postures have each had their place, with practical and spiritual reasons guiding the choice. Side sleeping was likely the most common in many ancient societies, particularly where bedding was minimal. On firm mats, woven reeds, or the bare ground, lying on the side reduced pressure points and allowed for easier breathing. Ancient Egyptian headrests, designed to keep the neck elevated, naturally encouraged a tilted side-leaning position. In Ayurvedic tradition, sleeping on the left side was said to aid digestion and circulation, while the right side was preferred for certain health benefits. Back sleeping, though less common in crowded or less comfortable settings, carried a sense of prestige and ceremony. In Greek and Roman arts, reclining figures are often shown lying on their backs during banquets or in funerary depictions, symbols of relaxation and status. In some cultures, sleeping face up was linked to openness and receptivity to dreams, though others warned it could leave the soul too exposed to wandering spirits. Fetal position, sleeping curled knees to chest, has deep roots in human instinct. It conserves body heat, protects the abdomen, and mirrors the safety of the womb. Many indigenous groups favored this posture on cold nights, especially when sleeping in close groups under shared blankets or hides. It also offered a way to fit multiple people into tight quarters, whether in longhouses, yurts, or ship hammocks. Sleeping positions could even be ritualized. Certain warrior cultures trained themselves to sleep in fixed postures, ready to rise quickly if danger came. Monastic orders sometimes dictated positions for discipline and humility, forbidding overly comfortable arrangements. Though mattresses and pillows have evolved, the human body hasn't changed much, whether stretched out like a ruler, curled like a cat, or resting somewhere in between. These ancient postures remain as familiar today as they were thousands of years ago. For most of human history, sleep did not happen in one unbroken stretch. In the centuries before artificial lighting reshaped the night, many people naturally followed a pattern known today as segmented sleep, a first sleep and a second sleep, separated by a period of quiet wakefulness around midnight. Historical records, from medieval Europe to early modern Asia, mention this pattern casually, as if everyone understood it. People would retire soon after sunset, often sleeping for 4 to 5 hours before waking in the stillness of the night. This waking interval, which could last from 30 minutes to over an hour, was not seen as a problem. It was a natural, pure, and even valued part of life. During these midnight awakenings, people engaged in a variety of activities. Some prayed, meditated, or recited verses, seeing this moment as spiritually potent. Others tended to small chores, mending clothes, checking the fire, or tending livestock. Couples sometimes used this time for intimacy, believing the body was more rested and receptive. In more communal settings, neighbors might even quietly visit one another, sharing a whispered conversation before returning to bed. The second sleep carried them into the morning, refreshed by this unusual rhythm. Historical medical texts even praised the practice, claiming it improved digestion, mood, and dream recall. In some rural areas, this pattern persisted well into the 19th century, fading only as gas lamps, electric lighting, and factory schedules pushed bedtimes later and compressed sleep into a single block. Modern sleep science has confirmed that segmented sleep is not a strange quirk of the past, but a natural response to the body's circadian rhythms when freed from artificial light. In other words, our ancestors' midnight awakenings were less a disruption than a quiet, productive interlude, an intimate pause in the middle of the night's long embrace. Across millennia, in deserts and mountains, on riverbanks and within bustling cities, night has been humanity's most constant companion. Civilizations have risen and fallen, languages have changed, and ways of living have transformed beyond recognition, but the cycle of rest remains. From the pharaoh's gilded bed to the shepherd's blanket under the stars, from the healer's dream temple to the sailor's swaying hammock, the act of closing one's eyes and surrendering to sleep is a ritual that binds us all. Though the materials, beliefs, and sounds of the night have shifted, the essence of rest has not. It is the same deep breath taken at the edge of consciousness, the same slow drift into a world of dreams. Night offers more than physical restoration. It has always been a space for stories whispered by firelight, carved into clay tablets, painted onto temple walls, or told in the quiet rhythm of a loved one's breathing beside us. It is in these moments that we share the most human of experiences: vulnerability, peace, and the hope of waking to another dawn. In looking back at the sleeping habits of our ancestors, we find more than curiosity, we find kinship. The Roman merchant resting after a day's labor, the Han scholar pausing with tea before bed, the Mayan shaman seeking visions in the night all knew the comfort of surrendering to rest. Though our beds may now be softer, our rooms quieter, and our nights brighter with artificial light, the need is unchanged. To sleep is to trust the night, to let go of the waking world, and to join an unbroken chain of sleepers stretching back to the very beginning of humankind. The night, in all its forms, belongs to everyone, and in its quiet embrace, we are reminded that, despite our differences in time and place, we all close our eyes to the same darkness and awaken together to the light.